The Commuter is directed by Jaime Colette Serra. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And this movie stars Liam Neeson, Patrick Wilson, and Vera Farmiga. And also Sam Neill is in this film as well. And this is the story of Liam Neeson's character, who is basically an insurance salesman who is basically living his day-to-day job, living his day-to-day life, going on a train every morning. And while this on his day to work, after he gets the news that he's pretty much going to be pretty much being let off of his job, he decides to take a train. And there he meets a young woman named Joanna, portrayed by Vera Farmiga, and she prompts him to do a task for him after she asks him, as a kind of a way of experimenting, as kind of a hypothetical experiment that she's trying to do. But then, and she wants him to pretty much look for somebody on the train, and he'll be paid for $100,000. And what he doesn't realize is that this is actually a serious situation. And when she leaves the train, it's up to Liam Neeson it's up to Liam Neeson's character having to look for this particular person on the train. While Neeson's character is going around trying to look for this person, there's some stuff happening outside the train and inside the train where the shit goes down. Now here's some backstory. Now, this is the same director who previously directed Liam Neeson in films such as Unknown, and also in Nonstop, and also Run All Night. And from the trailers, from what I got, and keep in mind, I actually enjoy those other films. I haven't seen Unknown, but I have seen Nonstop and Run All Night. And seeing those films with Liam Neeson as well, I can say that those are probably one of his better action movies that I probably like more so than some of the Taken sequels. So those other films that he did, I actually found I found very fascinating. And this director really, I think, has a lot of talent. Because this director also did The Shallows a couple years ago, which I found very fascinating. And the trailers kind of got me curious, because it seemed like this movie was kind of going like the way of, if basically you took the plot of Nonstop and put it in, and kind of took that plot and put it in something like Under Siege 2 Dark Territory with Steven Seagal from the 90s. At least in the fact that it's on a train, you have a similar plot to Nonstop in that regard. And I wasn't like really hyped for this movie, but I was going into it with some expectations, because I enjoyed Liam Neeson as an action star, and when I heard that he was pretty much going to probably be retiring soon after, I think, this film, as far as action movies go, he was wanting to take a pretty much step down as an action star. And if this is one of his last films, I can honestly say that I actually found this film actually quite underrated. I actually really got into it. And to get my pros out of the way, I highly enjoyed Liam Neeson in this film. Once again, he shows that he's capable not only as an action star, but also he's playing a regular type of guy in this kind of film. He plays an ex-cop who's pretty much an insurance salesman, and when he's piecing together clues here and there of what's going on this train, you really get the sense of the kind of stuff that he used to do as a cop and everything. And I really enjoy that aspect, because throughout the film he's identifying different people on this train and kind of getting to know them, so to speak, because that also falls into Vera Farmiga's character, who he meets at the beginning, who's basically into like a psychology, so to speak, where she tries to get to know, she starts conversations and gets to know people of how they are with getting around things, and trying to know people based on like body language, and the way that they can, I guess, so to speak, how they can go by their personality. And Liam Neeson's character really does that a lot throughout this film. In a way, it actually kind of reminds me of the plot of Murder on the Orient Express that came out last year, if that film was more action-oriented, because this seems like it took the plot of that movie and kind of made it more so like a action thriller type of vibe instead of a straight-up mystery. And I actually really enjoy the way that the film goes along with him having to look for clues and stuff like that while trying to figure out why all this is happening. And this is not really a spoiler, because you pretty much get the idea behind the trailers that pretty much Vera Farmiga's character is the one behind all this, and she's pretty much having him do all this stuff, or else more things will happen pretty much either off the train or inside the train. And so the way that the film goes along, it really pushes, I think it really pushes the stakes higher, because you really get the sense that pretty much anything can happen, either the people that are surrounding Liam Neeson, and along with people that he's close to as well, that I really enjoyed. And another one of my biggest pros that I have with this film is the director of this really knows how to choreograph fight scenes in this film, because there's a fight scene that takes place where the camera pretty much takes place like as pretty much one take, where it's kind of going like across the train, so to speak, while the two characters are fighting. And I love the way that the choreography works in this, because you get a lot of wide angles where you get to see a lot of the actors in place, and it never cuts. You don't have that stupid editing that they use in the Taken films. They actually shoot it to where you can actually pretty much know what's happening. I thought it was a pretty badass fight scene, and I also thought their other performances were great too, especially Vera Farmiga. You know, ever since I've seen her on Bates Motel, I think that she really does great as a villain in this, and she's very cold, and she really has that kind of like, that kind of sense of like edge to her, so to speak, that I highly enjoy, and I really admire her as an actress. And it was also great seeing Patrick Wilson in this movie too, because it's funny that both her and Patrick Wilson are in this film, and they don't have any scenes together, but it's kind of like a reunion with them from the Conjuring films, except they don't have any scenes together. But basically, and also, it was really great seeing Sam Neill again in the movie, because I haven't seen him probably in a movie in a long time. The last time I seen him in a movie was a movie called United Passions, and that film really was awful. But it was great seeing him back on the big screen, and I really admire him as an actor, and it's cool that he's still getting roles these days, because he plays the captain of the police office, the New York police and everything. That's trying to who pretty much meets Liam Neeson's character at the beginning of the film, and then, not going to spoil what happens later, but basically he comes into play later on in the movie. And one of my other biggest pros that I do have with this movie as well is that it also makes you feel the sense of, things like that happen in a train, I actually can really buy, because it's good that we're getting more films these type of movies that are kind of set on trains, because we don't usually get that too much in action movies. I mean, the last time I can think of where we had a type of action movie like this, where a majority of it takes place on a train, is probably that movie Unstoppable with Denzel Washington and Chris Pine, but I never saw that one. Now, if I do have maybe any cons of this movie, I will say that even though I did highly enjoy the way that the film was going along with its plot, with Liam Neeson having to figure out stuff, I did kind of feel like it was a little too bit familiar to the other film that he was in called Nonstop, that was directed by the same guy, and it felt like they were kind of reusing a lot of that plot thread, because if you go back and watch Nonstop, that film kind of contains very similar plot elements like this one, and it's almost like you're watching the same film, and it can kind of get repetitive. It can kind of get a lot of too familiar territory when you're noticing a lot of the same stuff that's happening throughout the movie that he did in that movie as well. Another comment I did have, I felt like there were things that were happening conveniently that Liam Neeson was investigating throughout the film that I was kind of questioning, because when you pick up some of the pieces later on in the film, it's questionable how it all adds up necessarily, and how all these kind of things unfold, because they conveniently happen to appear at certain points in the film where you're kind of like, huh, how did that happen? So there were some, and how did that happen to where he didn't even notice? So there are some questionable things that are kind of out in the left field out there that don't always kind of add up. But I still went along with it as it went, because there were some things throughout the film I still was going along and the film did have its very unpredictable moments. It felt very unpredictable a lot throughout. And then the other con I have too is that there was some questionable CGI at the end that I felt was a little off in parts, and it did kind of remind me of something like out of the 90s that I kind of thought was, well, not necessarily from the 90s. It didn't look like it was rendered right, so to speak. But I won't spoil what happens. But basically, when you see it, you'll see it in the climax. And then. But other than that, I mean, I still really enjoy the film, and I do recommend it. I'm glad to see that, Liam Neeson is still doing these type of action movies, kind of these action thrillers with this director, and I would be really happy to see him more. If this is one of his last action movies, he actually went out with a pretty good one that I find very underrated. So with that, I'm actually going to give the film an 8.5 out of 10. For those of you who have also seen The Commuter, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching, and if you like what you see here, you can feel free to like and subscribe, and check out more of my reviews here on my channel, and you can also check out my website at filmfreaks.com, and I'll be seeing you in my next review. I'll see you later.